This news piece about the Wagner Group provides further insight into the complex and clandestine nature of Russia's use of private military companies, PMCs. As Putin stated, there's no law in Russia that explicitly regulates these organizations, which allows for a gray area where they can operate domestically and internationally, often outside the purview of conventional oversight mechanisms. President Putin's offer to the Wagner Group to continue operating under their present commander, Andrei Troshev, seems aimed at preserving the status quo, while simultaneously providing the government with a degree of plausible deniability regarding the actions of these mercenaries. The fate of Yevgeny Prigozhin, often reported as the real patron behind the Wagner Group, remains unclear. Known for his close ties to Putin, Prigozhin has been linked to various international operations that further Russia's geopolitical interests. His absence from Putin's meeting with the Wagner commanders might indicate a growing rift, or at least a public distancing between the two. The reported appearance of Wagner mercenaries in Belarus further complicates the situation, especially in the context of the recent rebellion. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko's role in brokering a deal for Prigozhin and his men raises questions about the shifting alliances and power dynamics within this opaque network. As always, these events should be viewed in light of the broader geopolitical context and within the scope of Russia's strategic interests. The activities and deployments of PMCs like the Wagner Group are often closely tied to Russia's broader foreign policy objectives, whether it's supporting pro-Russian forces in Ukraine, reinforcing Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, or elsewhere. Margot Grossberg's analysis suggests that the tide of the conflict might be turning in favor of Ukraine due to effective tactical maneuvers by the Ukrainian armed forces and potential issues within the Russian military. This assessment, while optimistic for Ukraine, should be interpreted with caution as battlefield conditions can change rapidly, and much depends on the resources, tactics, and resilience of the forces involved. Her focus on the Ukrainian troops' tactics, including the targeted strikes on Russian command posts and logistics centers, suggests that the Ukrainian forces are effectively disrupting the command and control, as well as the supply lines of the Russian forces. The capture of key areas near Bakhmut by Ukrainian units also indicates some measure of strategic progress. The fact that the Russian airborne troops in Bakhmut are still tied to the city, suffering losses and unable to be transferred elsewhere or withdrawn to the reserve, could suggest stretched resources or strategic complications for Russia. Grossberg's comments on the dismissal of Russian General Ivan Popov are particularly significant. If high-ranking officials are being dismissed for criticizing the state of affairs or due to potential leaks, this could indeed indicate problems within the Russian command structure. However, these observations are ultimately just one perspective on the situation. While they offer a snapshot of the current state of the conflict, the overall strategic outlook is likely to be influenced by a range of factors, many of which could be occurring behind the scenes. It's also important to remember that the balance of power in conflicts like these can shift suddenly and unpredictably. The withdrawal of Russian military personnel from Belarus could indicate a shift in Russia's strategic priorities or tactical considerations. Andrei Demchenko's report suggests a significant decrease in the Russian military presence in Belarus, although he also acknowledges the possibility of future redeployments. The absence of observed deployment of Wagner mercenaries to Belarus is noteworthy, especially given earlier reports about their possible presence. It could either suggest that the move did not happen, or it might be conducted in a less visible or less organized manner, possibly to avoid detection. The report from the Belarusian news agency Belte that the Wagner mercenaries in Belarus would share their combat experience with the Belarusian military could suggest a possible strengthening of Belarusian military capabilities, or a deeper cooperation between Belarus and the Wagner Group. This could have implications for regional security dynamics, especially given the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Despite the withdrawal of Russian troops, missile strikes on Ukraine from Belarus indicate that the area remains a critical front in the ongoing conflict. The troops stationed in Belarus being used to attack the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, highlight the strategic importance of Belarus in this conflict. This is a fluid and evolving situation, and it's important to follow updates from various sources to gain a comprehensive understanding of the dynamics at play. The reported purges within Russia's defense ministry GRU, military intelligence, and army following the mutiny led by the Wagner Group PMC leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, suggest a significant internal upheaval within Russia's military establishment. This could be part of a broader effort by Russian President Vladimir Putin to solidify his control over the country's security apparatus in the face of internal dissent and challenges to his rule. The detainment of high-ranking officers and the dismissal of others suspected of involvement in the mutiny indicates a crackdown on perceived threats within the military. The disappearance of General Sergei Surovikin adds a further layer of intrigue and uncertainty to the situation. The fact that some Wagner fighters are still in Ukraine's Luhansk Oblast, but not deployed in combat, could suggest a range of possibilities. They could be in a holding pattern, awaiting further orders, be serving a non-combat role, or even potentially be considering or negotiating a shift in loyalties. It's unclear at this point without additional information. Colonel Margot Grossberg's comments are a valuable perspective on these developments, though, as with any single-source analysis, it should be considered alongside other information and context. These actions could potentially have significant impacts on the balance of power within Russia's military and its ability to continue its operations in Ukraine and elsewhere. It will be important to continue monitoring the situation closely. Dmytro Kuleba, the Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, appears to be asserting that President Zelensky's tweet was directed at the specific issue of not providing a timeframe for Ukraine's invitation to NATO, rather than being a critique of the entire summit's decisions. His comments emphasize Ukraine's continued struggle for recognition and alignment with the Western world, and its relentless pursuit to be accepted into NATO. In the mentioned meeting, NATO leaders decided to remove the Membership Action Plan stage, which is a set of advice, assistance, and practical support tailored to the individual needs of countries wishing to join the alliance. This removal can be interpreted as a step forward, as it suggests that NATO leaders recognize Ukraine's significant progress in fulfilling the requirements needed to join NATO. However, the failure to issue an actual invitation to join the alliance may be disappointing for Ukraine, which has been seeking this as a way to bolster its security and political standing. It is important to note that NATO expansion, particularly to countries bordering Russia, has been a contentious issue. While expansion is seen by some as a way to spread stability and security, Russia perceives it as a strategic threat. This geopolitical tension is an important factor that influences the process and speed of Ukraine's accession to NATO. Despite the mixed results of the summit, Kuleba is emphasizing Ukraine's continued commitment to this diplomatic struggle and to aligning Ukraine more closely with the NATO alliance. It will be important to monitor further developments in this area. In this statement, Valery Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, appears to express a strong determination to protect Ukraine and its citizens in the face of ongoing conflict with Russia. He indicates that Ukraine is prepared to use its domestically produced weaponry for cross-border strikes against Russia, a move which would likely escalate the existing tensions between the two nations. Zaluzhny's comments reflect a level of frustration with the conditions imposed by Ukraine's Western allies concerning the use of certain types of weaponry and aircraft, suggesting that these restrictions may be hindering Ukraine's capacity to effectively defend itself. It should be noted, however, that these restrictions are likely in place due to the potential for such actions to escalate the conflict and possibly provoke a wider regional or international crisis. His comment about Putin's potential use of nuclear weapons reflects the high stakes and the extremely tense nature of the conflict. It also underscores the complexity of the situation, as any escalation of violence carries with it the risk of triggering a much larger conflict, possibly even involving nuclear powers. Zaluzhny's final comments emphasize his belief that it is up to Ukraine to decide how to handle its conflict with Russia. He suggests that Ukraine is prepared to take whatever action it deems necessary to protect its citizens and territory, even if such actions involve striking inside Russian territory. These are strong words that indicate a deep resolve to defend Ukraine's sovereignty, but they also carry the risk of further escalating an already volatile situation. This report gives an overview of the current military situation in Ukraine. Some key points. 1. Ukrainian air defense forces took down all 20 Shahed drones and 2 Kalibr missiles fired at the Kyiv region. 2. Russia conducted 52 airstrikes on Ukrainian positions, with Ukrainian forces responding with 8 airstrikes. 3. Ukrainian forces are making advances on the southern flank, while Russian forces are unsuccessfully counterattacking on the northern flank. 4. Russian forces have reportedly intensified the redeployment of personnel, ammunition, and equipment across the Kerch Bridge. 5. Shahid attacks and explosions have been reported in Kryvyi Rih and Odessa. 6. Explosions have also been reported in the Russian regions of Belgorod, Voronezh, and Kursk. 7. Ukrainian forces have made gains in the directions of Novodanilivka, Shiroka Balka, Malotokmachka, and Novopokrovka. 8. Former commander of the Russian 58th Combined Arms Army, Major General Ivan Popov, claimed he was dismissed by Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu for expressing concerns about problems on the western Zaporizhzhia region front line. 9. There are currently about 500 Russian military personnel and employees of the Rosatom nuclear company at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, NPP, which they reportedly use to shell populated settlements and store weapons and ammunition. The situation remains tense and fluid, with both sides continuing to engage in active hostilities. The presence of Russian military personnel and Rosatom employees at the Zaporizhzhia NPP is particularly concerning, as it suggests that the nuclear facility could potentially become a target in the conflict, which could have severe environmental and humanitarian consequences. This report mentions that the U.S. has supplied Ukraine with cluster munitions, a controversial type of weapon known for their wide-area impact and potential long-term risks to civilians. Ukrainian Army Commander Oleksandr Tarnavsky has stated that these weapons can radically change the battlefield, and they plan to deploy them with caution, avoiding heavily populated areas due to the risk of unexploded bomblets causing harm to civilians. It's important to note that these weapons are banned by many countries under the 2008 Oslo Convention due to their indiscriminate impact and the potential for unexploded bomblets to pose a long-term threat. Neither Russia, the US, nor Ukraine are signatories to this convention. The Kremlin, in response, has stated it will take countermeasures if these weapons are deployed by Ukraine against Russian troops. What exactly these countermeasures might be is not specified, but it suggests that the deployment of these weapons could escalate the conflict further. Cluster munitions can indeed change the dynamics of a battlefield due to their wide-area impact, but they also come with significant humanitarian concerns, and their use in the conflict is likely to be controversial.